Where jealousy and selfish ambition are found, every foul practice is there. What St. James is saying in that second reading, it's interesting the way he words that, every foul practice. He's not saying like, this is one of those things, that you got to do right. Like in some of the places in Scripture, it tells us, make sure you do this, or make sure you get this right. But it doesn't often say that if this is there, everything falls down and implodes. But that's what he says about jealousy and selfish ambition. You will find where those things are, you will find every foul practice. That makes it a little bit more than just try not to be jealous or selfishly ambitious. It takes it to another level when he says the whole thing falls apart. I think, first of all, we see jealousy and selfish ambition in our gospel today, in the bickering of the 12 that Jesus had pulled aside and had been teaching and trying to help them understand this, the inner workings of his teachings. And even they are arguing and have jealousy and have this ambition to be first, to be the best. And of course, we know from elsewhere that Jesus had his inner circle of Peter, James, and John that he pulled aside in particular times to show them and give them an even more specific mission. And so they got to see particular things or receive special teachings. And so instead of just kind of acknowledging that, of course, they're arguing these 12 people, 11 of whom would be chosen to have the church founded on them, and the first apostles and bishops, selfish ambition and jealousy. Right? And we still see it in the priesthood. I want to talk tonight just briefly. I want to kind of jump back and forth between the priesthood and then all of us in our own lives, in which the ways jealousy and ambition is present, and also the antidotes to those things, I think. But I just know, like, looking at the priesthood for just a moment, I know that for all people, but just for men for a moment, I know that it can just easily become something that, like, in any career, it just becomes about, like, you can just start to get into that mindset of, like, advancement, right? Like, let's just move up, you gotta move up, you gotta win, right? You have to have other people say, hey, you're awesome, so you get the promotion, right? And that's inside, that pressure, I think, in some ways comes from inside, but it also comes from outside. And it's not even, a lot of times it's not even something that's conscious. I hear from people, non-priests, all the time, I bet you can't wait till you get a bigger parish. Do you want to be the vicar general, which is the number 2? Do you want to be a bishop? Do you want to be an archbishop? What does it take to be a cardinal? And even, like, from really little kids who are totally honest, Father, could you ever be the Pope? Right? And I know a lot of priests, you get those questions. Every priest gets that. It's just like the default thought that, oh, well, that priest must want to go up. He must want to move up. And I think it's not just priests. It's everybody thinks that about everybody else. Every career. Right? Oh, the assumption is just that, you must want that. Right? The problem there, I think, is that, like, it becomes this default thought, I think, for everybody on all ways of life, not just for bishops, not just for apostles, but for all of us. There's this desire for accolades and for praise and for recognition. And it's just something that, again, you have that, but the problem is we find that those things don't fill the void that can only be filled in my heart by God. And so the more we clamor for those things, the more we desire accolades, praise, and recognition, I think we might be able to say, maybe it's because there's less God filling us. So we have this hunger and this need for that. Right? The solutions, there's a couple solutions to what St. James notices, this jealousy and this selfish ambition. One of the solutions, I don't want to spend too much time on, but I mean, it's talked about in the first reading. One of the first ways to drive out selfish ambition and jealousy is persecution. Right? When persecution, these apostles that are all arguing about who's the greatest and the best, guess what happens on the night when swords are drawn? They all run. Hey, don't you know Jesus? Never heard of him. Never heard of him. But I was arguing about 2 years ago about whether or not I was the best apostle. Suddenly, when you have persecution, and just for a second, if we're thinking about the church for a minute, bishops, priests, all that stuff, when there's persecution and suddenly there's not mansions, in the deal for being a bishop or an archbishop, and there's not seats of honor anymore, and no one cares about that, and there's not nice cars, and there's not vacations and travel and all that kind of stuff, guess what? Nobody wants to be bishop. Or at least they don't want to be because of the jealousy and the selfish ambition. They might want to do it out of the goodness of their heart. But the jealousy and the selfish ambition are not there anymore. Now, we don't want persecution, right? We're not waiting for that. We're not hoping that happens. But I think it is important, as we heard in that first reading described, there's people that are ready to persecute, and it's happening all over the world. And in those places where persecution happens, we just see, what do we see? We see the church thrive. Why? Because there's no selfish ambition and there's no jealousy, because no one wants to be there for the wrong reason. And if we think about persecution for just a moment, I think it's important to note that, it might not be as far away as we think. And some of it might come upon us eventually because of the things that we've done to ourselves as church leaders. We've talked about that seemingly for the last 3 months. Right? But I think if you don't see it coming, if you don't see the clouds, at least on the horizon, of persecution in our culture, in our country, then I don't think you're paying attention. The number of people in any political party, in any background, whatever it might be, the number of people that have a disdain for religion is skyrocketing. And if you don't think that people are really starting to mob up, and I'm not saying about the scandals, I'm just talking about in general, a year ago, the same thing, then you're not listening, and you're not reading things online, and you're not on college campuses, and you're not, I'm telling you, it's out there. And that's one thing that would start to drive away jealousy and ambition. And again, we hope that stuff doesn't happen, but I think that's one thing. I don't want to spend any more time on that. Because I want to talk about the spiritual solution to jealousy and ambition and selfish ambition that brings the whole house down. Because James goes into that in the second reading. And I think the spiritual solution to this issue of jealousy and selfish ambition is contentment. Contentment. That's what James puts forward in the second reading after naming jealousy and selfish ambition as a thing that can destroy everything. He puts forward the idea that contentment with what you have, where you are, drives away jealousy and selfish ambition. It brings peace. And it does. As J.R.R. Tolkien said, it's not a bad thing to celebrate a simple life. My favorite country song right now is called Simple. Very simple title. It talks about the joys of just living a simple life, away from the rat race of trying to get more accolades and get more promotions and all those kinds of things, and just looking around and saying, I have enough. I have enough. As a priest, going back to that for a second, I, like you, like everybody else, you're pulled in that direction. You're because of original sin. There's an attraction to accolades, promotions, having people like you, all that kind of stuff. You're pulled in that direction. But I would say that, and so when people are like, bigger parish, vicar general, bishop, all those kinds of things that every priest gets asked, is a party that's wow, that would be nice. Someone else telling me that I'm good or better or whatever, like the apostles 2,000 years ago. But I would say that, and again, I'm not holding myself up as an example, but I'm just sharing my own personal experience. I have found great peace in all of that and just saying, I am so blessed where I'm at. I'm so blessed being the pastor of Clay in Putnam County and a little bit of ego. I love it. Today, I went and got to go for a beautiful run in rural Indiana, which I love. I love this area of Indiana. It's where I grew up, in this kind of area, trees and cornfields. And I don't think a lot of bishops or vicar generals get to do that. I know the Pope doesn't. I got to go to 2 soccer games this morning, one in down by Ellettsville and another over in Cascade, and got to see parishioners win conference. And it was just a blast. And I'm like, if you're the vicar general or whatever, you have some big job, you don't get that. You don't get to do that kind of stuff. And then I was here for a 100th birthday party for Jean Gorham, right, a parishioner of ours here in the narthex this afternoon, right? And all that kind of stuff, like, I think that's what James is putting forward and saying, do we just look around and say, you know what, I have enough money, and I don't need the promotion. Why am I even wanting the promotion? I don't even know in my job. I don't even know why I want to be recognized as a better lawyer or a better doctor or a better teacher or have this position or win this award or have this new promotion. I'm like, why am I even wanting that? I have enough. And it just drives me nuts thinking about that kind of stuff. But when I look around and I say, you know what, God has given me enough, I can be content with that. There's a great peace that sets in our hearts, in our lives. And suddenly we're not jealous of other people. We don't sit around at work bickering about other people because we secretly really want their job and we want the praise that they got or the accolades that they got. And I don't try to climb higher. We don't want that stuff because we say, you know what, I have enough. I am so blessed. I think that's what James is inviting us to do. Right? And I love that Jesus puts towards these men who are arguing about and are jealous of each other and have selfish ambition, what does he put forward as an example, as in the antidote? James puts forward contentment. Jesus puts forward a child. Because a child is typically content. A child recognizes, for the most part, is pretty happy as long as there's food and a clean diaper. Like they're pretty okay with what's going on. And I think that's the answer for us, right? That's what we're being invited, I think, to think about in response to our culture, in response to the world that seeks to get us to work more and more and drive more and more and more. May we just simply look around and recognize in our lives and in our families, we're so blessed. We don't have everything, but we have enough. And when we get to that, we can finally have hearts full of gratitude to God. Because we're not thinking anymore about what we don't yet have. We're thinking about all the blessings that God has given to us. And we can finally say to Him, Lord, your grace is enough.